Hello, everyone. Good morning. We have some juicy tidbits today. There's been some files released about the Chinese response, or rather, the communist government's response, the Chinese government, communist government's response to the pandemic to try to avoid YouTube strikes here. But before we get into that, I actually would like to, since we're throwing stones at glass houses, talk about the American response and involvement in the early stages. I remembered reading something in passing about State Department cables, because remember initially we were talking about, which no one seems to be discussing anymore, because it's the prevailing theory is kind of lacking legs to stand on. We were talking about the wet market, right? And then people discovered that nearby the wet market, some ridiculous distance, like 90 feet, there is the Wuhan Lab of Virology, which is the Chinese Communist Party's only level 4 biolab, which was, rife with issues of biosafety concerns. They weren't following the regulations that had been set in place. The State Department as observers of the Institute were worried that there was going to be an incident like what may have happened, right? What is being hypothesized occurred. Because remember, what it is, it's called gain of function research. This is where they take known viruses and try to manipulate the capabilities of said virus for multiple reasons, whether it be to simply determine whether or not they can manipulate it or to actually make some sort of functionality out of it. Either way, this sort of research goes on all over the world. Dr. Fauci belongs to an organization that worked with the Wuhan Lab of Virology on gain of function research for particular viruses, including RNA and coronaviruses. And so what ends up happening is no one talks about the wet lab, the wet market. No one talks about the lab nearby. But the State Department cables and the incident thereof never quite went away, and so the Washington Post ended up suing the State Department back in April. Regarding the diplomatic cables, because they reported on it and the State Department didn't want to release it. So we're just going to go over this briefly for a second here. State Department releases cables that help spread claims coronavirus emerged from Chinese lab. The department released a 2018 diplomatic cable noting that the Wuhan Institute of Virology had a serious shortage of appropriately trained technicians and investigators needed to safely operate this high containment laboratory. Contents of the 2-year-old cable, which were leaked earlier this year, provided fodder for unproven allegations from members of the Trump administration and Congress that coronavirus may have escaped from the lab at the epicenter of the virus. Remember, it's all just alleged. It's just, it's an interesting sort of ABC. The proximity of the wet market to the lab, the failings of the lab and the safety concerns of the State Department that were never really addressed by the Trump administration, or perhaps, and that's the thing, it's perhaps better left to say that they were not given, 2 years, you figure 2 years, they should be given more scrutiny, should be taken more seriously. But like I said, Dr. Fauci's institute, which is a large national organization, works with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And there's a lot of money involved, and there's a lot of scientific discovery to be made. So it doesn't surprise me. But let's see, the January 2018 cable obtained by the Washington Post after a FOA lawsuit noted that ties between the Wuhan Institute and the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston could help alleviate the shortage, and that reportedly the U.S.-based institution was training technicians to work at the WIV. A second cable about the WIV from April 2018 cited a French official who said that French experts have provided guidance and biosafety training to the lab, which will continue. Secretary of State Pompeo was among the most vocal in suggesting that the deadly virus could have escaped from the WIV. Although Pompeo still speaks out forcefully against the Chinese government for its role in the lack of transparency, the secretary recently seemed to back away from the theory. In an interview in mid-May, he conceded, "We know it began in Wuhan, but we don't know from where or from whom, and those are important things." while both Pompeo and Donald Trump earlier this year claimed evidence. Blah blah blah. Yeah. So, and interestingly enough, the origins of the virus actually at this point are not being discussed at all, and it kind of reached its apex with Dr. Judy Merkovits and I don't even know if I can say her name actually on YouTube, but that pandemic related DIY documentary. I mean, aren't all documentaries DIY? With a particular doctor in it. It kind of reached the apex there. And then once that was removed, and videos like it were removed and have subsequently continued to be removed, you don't hear discussions on the origin. And it's like the zoological theory that was originally proposed. That's not even like, no one seems to be discussing the pathology of this virus anymore. So fine, all right, and then yes, this is the lawsuit that led to the April revelation from the State Department of those documents. All right, so the Wuhan Files. A group of frontline medical workers, likely exhausted, stand huddled together on a video conference call as China's most powerful man raises his hand in greeting. It's February 10th, and President Xi Jinping, who for weeks has been absent from public view, is addressing hospital staff in the city of Wuhan from a secure room about 1,200 kilometers, or 745 miles for Americans, from the epicenter. Xi expressed his condolences to those who have died. He urged greater public communication as around the world concerns mounted about the potential threat posed by the new disease. That same day, Chinese authorities reported 2,478 new confirmed cases, raising the global total to more than 40,000, with fewer than 400 cases occurring outside mainland China. Yet CNN can now reveal how official documents circulated internally that this was only part of the picture. In a report marked internal document, please keep confidential. Oh, and that actually makes me think of, the WHO and China and the issues that they were having there with transfer and transparency of information, both on the part of the Chinese Communist government and of the World Health Organization. It's an ABC thing. The Chinese Communist Party lied and withheld information from the World Health Organization. And once the WHO realized this, they then were not transparent in their being, but undermined in their ability to investigate and respond accordingly. So the Chinese government screwed over the WHO, and the WHO covered their own ass, is what I believe occurred. One way or another, we do know that the WHO dropped the ball tremendously in their response, withheld information, and told conflicting stories, or rather gave conflicting advice. Oh boy. All right. So, local health authorities in the province of Hubei, where the virus was first detected, list a total of 5,918 newly detected cases on February 10th, more than double the official public number of confirmed cases, breaking down the total into a variety of subcategories. This larger figure was never fully revealed at the time, as China's accounting system seemed, in the tumult of the early weeks of the pandemic, to downplay the severity of the outbreak. The previously undisclosed figure is among a string of revelations contained within the 117 pages of leaked documents from the Hubei Provincial Center for Disease Control and Prevention, shared with and verified by CNN, which doesn't say much. CNN's key findings. Chinese officials gave the world more optimistic data than they had access to internally. China's system took on an average 23 days to diagnose confirmed patients, and testing failures meant most received negative results until January 10th. A history of underfunding, understaffing, poor morale, and bureaucratic models of governance hampered China's early warning system, internal audits found. And a large and previously undisclosed outbreak of influenza happened in early December in the Hubei province. This is what I was saying. I ended up severely sick and needed brief hospitalization in March. My birthday's on Christmas, and I heard about this at the end of December, like New Year's. So New Year's, I heard Christmas comes around, birthday comes around, New Year's comes around, and I start to hear about this, and then not a month later, I was sick all the way through until March, and I could have swore I had it. But one of the reasons why I believed myself to have had it is because of the timing in which I began to get sick, which was right around December, which is when I was hearing about this. And it took a while for it to manifest itself. But I was just being a hypochondriac. I've actually tested almost weekly since like August. It's just constant negative, and it's like, why are you doing that? Anyway, I digress. Yes, taken together, the documents amount to the most significant leak from inside China since the beginning of the pandemic and provide the first clear window into what local authorities knew internally and when. The Chinese government has steadfastly rejected accusations made by the United States and other Western governments that it deliberately concealed information relating to the virus, maintaining that it has been upfront since the beginning of the outbreak, which we know to be false because, again, the WHO has been caught not divulging information when they had it, and then not having information that they were supposed to have in a timely manner. And of course, they place the blame on the Chinese Communist Party. We can follow the string along enough to know that both dropped the ball. Now, as for why, I mean, the really it all starts and ends with the CCP. So, however, the documents provide no evidence of a deliberate attempt to obfuscate findings. They do reveal numerous inconsistencies in what authorities believe to be happening and what was revealed to the public. It's always the job of mainstream media and the entertainment industry to cater to their largest demographic or their most enriching and profitable watch group. And I mean, for example, with Fox, that's like conservatives and blue collar workers. And for mainstream media and entertainment industry, they cannot be seen to openly attack or accuse the Chinese Communist Party of anything. I mean, really, of anything. Especially the entertainment industry. So it's amazing to me how they do everything but call them liars. They insinuate they're lying. They mention that numerous inconsistencies. They mention the internal politics and the internal statistics and divulging of information being inconsistent and mismatching. So you do everything but call them a lie. Why don't you just say they're lying? Because in their defense, in their journalistic defense, which is interesting given it's CNN, you want to stay away from accusations, right? I mean, there's no sort of communication indicating an outright effort to undermine. Excuse me. So, I get it, but it amuses me how inflammatory and hyperbolic our language can be when it comes to, for example, the office of the President of the United States. Irrelevant of what you perceive or consider of your subject that you're speaking of, there needs to be journalistic integrity at all times. And we can I feel like most of us can agree that there's been very little integrity, very little maturity on the part of the media. That is to say that good old Orange Man hasn't fed them more than enough to chew on. But you're not supposed to take the bait, but you do because it's clickbait and it's money. But to bring this video to a close before I go on too long, the documents, which cover an incomplete period between October 2019 and April this year, reveal what happens to be an inflexible healthcare system constrained by top-down bureaucracy and rigid procedures that were ill-equipped to deal with an emerging crisis. At several critical moments in the early phase of the pandemic, the documents show evidence of clear missteps and point to a pattern of institutional failings. They go on to talk about their inability to diagnose, to corroborate information. And of course, the Chinese government definitely doesn't like to be called out. But the house here is waking up, so I'm going to cut this short. Please like and subscribe and be well to each other.